have the Ayatollah of fantasy rock and roller with us today, Adam Rank. How you doing, Rank?
They look great in person, and I just can't wait till next year where we can pack it full of 25,000.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I didn't know it was Ball Guys Day. It was being ranked. I mean, how can you lose?
This is the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast.
Welcome to the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast. We are on episode 55-ish, give or take. I'm not too sure. Calvin, I think we're hitting about 57 shows we've done since January 13th between you and me and the Team Spotlight Series, and, of course, the Behind the Grind here. Joining us today, we have ourselves a very special guest. And we're going to start off by scratching the cervix, and we're going to go from there. Today, welcome, Chad Parsons. How you doing?
Hey, great. Scared of snakes, but not scared of the show. So let's hit it.
That's good. We should probably ask you for your safe word ahead of time, but we'll probably just mute you before you can say it. So we have got a pretty good record so far. No one's had to use their safe word. So hopefully we can keep that record going on. And we promise you there's not going to be any water moccasins or anything like that kind of come out of nowhere. So.
But it's not the way you think. Like, we try to get them to say their safe word, and they just, so far, we haven't been able to push them far enough. So we've had good guests, in other words. So, but yeah, Major, how are we doing down there?
We are doing great, and I think we're going to push Chad to the limit today.
Let's do it. I'm ready. I don't even have a safe word. Never been pushed even close.
Let's go, baby.
So we are contractually obligated to talk football at the beginning of this show. It's only going to last 5 or 10 minutes. We kind of do it just to get it out of the way. People tune in for some football information, but we want to get to know you a little bit better. Hopefully we can do that. Share your story a little bit and your journey through the industry. But before we do, let's talk about the football. It's draft season. I know you're a big draft guy. I believe you're into the analytics and stuff like that. You got your models, and I just got to talk about your models here, like how you come up with these draft models. I know I want to go real deep here. I want to go back in time. And I want to figure out who is going to be the 2021 version of Chris Givens.
All right. I love that pull. Yeah, Chris Givens. Love that guy. He was thick, deep threat, and I remember he flashed as a rookie. Now, it only lasted about 1.5 years, 1.3 years, something like that. But yeah, day 3, if memory serves. And so who's going to be day 3 and flashing and warranting with a strong metric profile? I think that's going to be the leading question. And I'll tell you, this is a busy week because pro days are right here. Because it feels like, I'll tell you what, I mean, I don't know if you guys feel this way. The combine, I love it because it brings everything together. A lot of the information we want and we need in one day, or a 3-day span. And this checking every day about what pro days are up and what information we're trying to get and is it verified and official and all this stuff has been a big pain. I would say one guy from today, actually for the North Carolina Pro Day is Dyami Brown, someone that I was tracking. And he's on that, he's kind of trending now, expected draft position, which a shout out, a guy that's going to be on the UTH this week is Benjamin Robinson from Grinding the Mocks. He does a lot of great compilation of mock draft data. And Dyami Brown's been a riser. He's up into the 70s. So I don't know if he's going to drift, especially with his workout today. But we're talking about a guy with deep speed, range, ran in the 4.4s, 190 pounds or so, and really ran circles around Daz Newsome, his teammate. And they were pretty close to begin the cycle here in the pre-draft process. So he's one. Tamorian Terry is probably another one that I like. Seth Williams might be trending to day 2, but he's another one. And one of my favorites, and he's a Marquise Brown, sort of like put him in your pocket in terms of his size. But Tutu Atwell's another just straight burner. And what we know is speed kills. So if you get a guy that's vertical, it doesn't take a lot of targets, and frankly, not many rookie receivers get a lot of targets. So that's always what I'm looking for if we're going deeper, and it's a really deep class. But drifting to round 3, round 4, round 5, those are some of the guys that have my interest, that they can get on a depth chart, and if it's the right one, they could actually make some plays, and like you were saying, maybe be the Chris Givens of this year.
You touched on... I'm sorry. No,
with
you touched on it
everybody.
a little bit. Can you mind going into a little bit more detail, like the combine and the pro day and how that, like, what kind of effect is that going to have on your model, but also I think like the standardization of having like the times and the those type of things that we normally get out of the combine. That's going to be a little bit. Is it going to be less reliable? I mean, is some of the information that we get over the next few years from these prospects as we're tracking it going to be a little bit less something we can count on?
Yeah, that's one thing that I've talked about a few times this process, which is I'm a believer that this whole like you have to actually add to say 40 times for pro days. I don't believe in that because I put myself, and again, I am a level 1. If these guys are level 10 athletes, I'm a level 1. But I do athletic things, and I do know that if you tell me you're going to travel halfway across the country and you're going to be poked and prodded and have all these medical appointments, you're going to be stressed out. And then after a couple days of that and interviews and tests and all this, you need to perform at your physical best. I am for sure not going to do that because of the surroundings and the entire schedule and atmosphere. And then if you tell me, hey, keep training, 4-6 weeks later, you're going to be able to sleep in your own bed, go to the stadium you're familiar with, and perform the same drills without all of the, secondary surroundings there. I guarantee I will work out better. So I think these are legit times. Not many people say that. Not many people are going to go by this. These are real times. I think almost every prospect should work out at the combine, work out again at their pro day, find the best one. And that's why you run twice, right? They take the best time. So give yourself as many chances. So these guys that if they're fit and sound to run at the combine, they choose not to. Now you're down to one chance. You had 2 chances. Now you're down to 1. And for guys that never run, to me that is that I'm not gonna say it's a yellow flag. It's an orange flag. The guys like Devontae Booker, I remember we all assumed he was gonna run 4.50 or I can't remember what it was, but he never ran. So we never knew. And guess what? He comes into the NFL not quite as athletic as we thought. So there's a number of cases where you don't work out. And I'm not going to throw shade at Devonta Smith, but I'm going to throw a little shade, which is he's probably not as fast as we think he is. So we're getting a lot of fast times. But guess what? Home tracks, comfortable environment, more lead up time and prep. They should be better than the combine, which would have been in February. So to me, these are legit times. I'm judging them straight, and I think this might prove to be a year where prospects look ahead to next year and beyond, and they go, I'm going to run. I'm going to run at my pro day. I ran at the combine, but I think I can do better. And if you do worse, guess what? Everyone's going to remember the combine time anyway. So unless you're blazing 4.35 or better or something, I say run. I say do all the drills, and I say get multiple reps and show what training an extra 3, 4, 5 weeks can do if you don't do something well, and how much you can train and dedicate. Because I think the biggest part of the interview is just showing, even if this doesn't apply 1-to-1 to the field, it shows this is a test. I'm going to study. I know this is important, and I'm going to show you what my work ethic is. So I really love this, and I think it shows more than just who can run and who can't run. It shows a lot more than that in terms of the pre-draft and the interview process.
I think it's a little funny how the hand times are always a little bit faster than
Have you ever tried to hand time?
I have, actually.
It's so dicey. I will say that there's times like it's wildly different, and I've timed it like 30 times in a row and never gotten the same time twice. It's wild.
Right.
So these hand times, you do the best you can, and I always love they give you the old Popeye eye. They're always looking down the line. They're doing this, but they get 1 rep at it.
Right.
And so one thing I've been doing, and I think it's really beneficial in terms of, Devi and when prospects are yet to hit the pre-draft process, is I've been doing max speed measuring. And there's a few others on Twitter that have been doing it. But for college prospects, and if you really don't have much of an idea, you start measuring their max speed during games and breakaway plays in a straight line, you get an idea who's 20 miles an hour, 21, 19. And so now you can start to get some shading. And I'm not going to say it's perfect, but you at least have a better idea who's 4.4, 4.5, 4.6. So that's part of it, is putting together these puzzle pieces on who might be at risk going into the combine, their pro day, which if we're making moves, we're making projections in January, February before we have pretty much anything. I mean, that's the best we're probably going to be able to get.
Yeah. So from the Matrix standpoint, who do you feel is the safest player to draft for Dynasty, regardless of landing spot?
For any position?
Yeah, any position. Or give us one from each Give us
Sure,
one
sure.
quarterback,
Well,
one
safe
receiver.
is
Yeah.
safe, and a floor and ceiling are all different things. Like safe, Kyle Pitts in terms of a tight end that's probably going to go top 10. The tight end position, I mean, one of my mantras is first round tight ends don't miss. Now, what is that value for a dynasty player? That can have varying degrees. That can be Jermaine Gresham. That can be Brandon Pettigrew. They didn't miss, but yet the floor is the part that you're buying. I think the ceiling with Kyle Pitts is super high. So he's probably, he's the safest tight end prospect we've had in a number of years. And that includes 2017, which is a super strong class. At wide receiver, for me, that's Jamar Chase. The fact that he's going to have strong pedigree, but he's a 99% guy. I call him a top 1%er in the model. He hasn't worked out yet, but he's 21.5 years old, elite production. And again, strong recruit and coming out of a big time program where he produced pretty much right away and to a high level on that big Joe Burrow team. So those are two. I'd say the interesting part for me at running back is I think some people might say Najee Harris, but I think metrically and profile wise, the safest guy is Travis Etienne. He's younger by about a full year, and his profile with 89% receiving score, 95% rushing score, and he's still projected in the top 35 or so. So does he squeak into round one? I'm not sure, but he's the type that even if he goes early round two, like a lot of the guys in 2020 at running back, you don't really need to have that round one earmark anymore on your profile. Najee Harris is more likely to get it, but I think this is still relatively contested. So let's see how this goes, because Etienne as a round two running back, I think fits in metrically with a lot of the guys from last year that we heralded and drafted in the top five. And yet Etienne, I don't even know, he might not be running back 2 off of boards, but in Superflex, there's going to be 2, 3, maybe 4 quarterbacks ahead of him. I think there's a reasonable chance in the mid first you get a look at Travis Etienne. But his profile is, dare I say, and I don't throw around big comps very much, but he's Alvin Kamara-like in what he can offer as a receiver in the NFL level. So while he maybe not be a traditional guy, I think we're past the age of you can catch 100 balls and run 200 times and be highly effective and maybe one of the best fantasy options. So this might be a hot take, but for me it really is. I don't think it's Trevor Lawrence and the entire field and everyone else should just go away at the quarterback position. Trevor Lawrence is my quarterback 1, but in terms of fantasy safety, I think someone like Trey Lance and Justin Fields actually have a safer ceiling and floor combination because of their elite rushing profile and potential. So and we're dealing with Jalen Hurts, and I think both of these guys are better than Jalen Hurts. You're seeing a guy that's going to go out there, run around, and still be a top 12 to 18 fantasy option, even if they can't really throw. Let's be realistic. So if you have that sort of potential, and if they can prove to be, good throwers, which I think Trey Lance, with his small sample size, but with what he could offer, like excuse me, I get choked up talking about Trey Lance.
So excited.
Need some water. But Trey Lance is a top 1%er in my model. And now with all the teams trading up, I think we're going to see him go very high. And in my opinion, he's probably going to be, top 5 in the NFL draft.
So just kind of touch on a quick couple things here. Bob kind of threw out Chuba Hubbard's name, good old Canadian boy. Battled a high ankle sprain, my understanding is, through most of the season. Do we think that the season that just was probably unfair to be judging him? We were talking about there's not very many 2,000-yard rushers that we devalued. You know what I mean? Right. We had a guy who rushed for over 2,000 yards, and we're pretty much discarding him at this point. I've got him number 4 on my board right now, still amongst the running backs, so I still believe him. But I'm also Canadian, so there's a lot of bias here.
No, I agree. Hubbard's 4 on my board. And this just goes to show you, junior, you have a chance as a running back to come out and be highly regarded. Now is high level of competition for the hierarchy of last year's class. But Hubbard, hurt his stock, perceptionally, visually this past year, playing through injury and being dinged up. And he's not a supersized guy either. He's a tweener, but he can legit run 4 threes. He's actually, one of the top 2 or 3 metric guys for this class profile wise, but yet he's on that round 3, round 4 kind of fringe. So I'm really excited. He's one of my target players, and I'm almost rooting for him to go early day 3 or day 2 to, a suboptimal situation, not one of the 2 or 3 big landing spots, because he's one of my guys. I really hope to be able to get him in round 2 of a one quarterback league, and maybe even the mid second of a super flex.
So you have him ranked above Gainwell?
Oh, easily. Yeah, I know Gainwell worked.
Okay.
Gainwell worked out well, but 195 pounds, a 27 BMI. It's really tough to get on board with that if you're not a really strong profile guy. And I know, production wise. So I see him as a receiving centric guy, the 1B to a 1A in a committee. Like, where does he fit NFL wise? So yeah, Carter is an interesting one. I reran his comps after today's workout, which was much improved. So he's moving up a little bit. But again, I think it falls off. And for me, it's more about the guys like Chuba Hubbard, Jamar Jefferson, who has zero appeal for some reason. And I'm not really sure why, but he's drifting out there in round 5 or 6 of NFL draft projections. But guys like that, I think it's not a great running back class. And I think some of those guys in the middle, and I actually think Javonte Williams today working out was a net negative for him, weighing in only at 212, running 4.55 or so from what I saw, and pretty middling drills overall. So he's one that, again, a lot of people had him over Etienne and or Harris in some ordering, but I always had him closer to Hubbard, and I could absolutely see after this and recalibrating that it could be Hubbard and Williams right there next to each other, even though Williams right now has a pretty sturdy lead in who's going to go first in the draft.
Yeah, I was surprised at his height. He came in at 5'9". I thought he was closer to like 5'11",
Yeah, and he runs big, he runs physical. I get all that, but 220, 225, I think was the expectation. And the fact if he trimmed down to 212 and yet he still ran 4.55, not a good look. If he bulks up to 220, is he going to be a 4.6 this guy? So he's got a lot of positives, but again, net negative with his pro day, and someone that again I think he's much closer to a tier with Chuba Hubbard than anything approaching the top 2 guys.
I like the key that you mentioned there that really caught me was something I've been kind of preaching a little bit is this is not a very good running back class. And we're pushing these running backs, especially in fantasy purposes, we're pushing them up our draft boards where there's going to be a lot of good players taken after them because we are pushing bad players up. And then we talked about Trey Lance and Justin Fields. They can still be very effective in the fantasy game, much like Lamar Jackson, who also does not know how to throw a ball. So we kind of get everything thrown together there, and we can see how that value can be sustained throughout seasons, right? So now, Calvin, this is your part here. We've talked enough about football. Take it away.
Well, I think I speak for everyone when I say that we could probably ask you questions about prospects for the next 2 hours and not run out of things to ask and talk about. And certainly would be super fascinating, but I'd encourage anybody who's listening to go out and listen to Chad's work because he does amazing things, and check out, all his articles, everything that he's doing, which he's going to get to highlight at the end. But now it's time to learn a little bit about Chad and his history in the business, and let's talk about the fantasy industry a little bit. I always like to start off with this because this kind of gets a little bit of that personality in there. Let's say you were a professional wrestler or a closer in baseball, something like that, and you had intro music that was going to hit and introduce you to a crowd. What would be that perfect song to get the crowd fired up and let everyone know who you were?
Oh man, I have a pretty eclectic taste in music, and definitely not the grunge or metal, or now I'm dating myself because I'm not even sure the proper terms. But so I'm not that guy. So that's tough. I have been learning more about classic rock, one of those Pandora channels that I've been learning, and a lot of people just roll their eyes because they're like, "Oh, you didn't really know who they were." Oh, that's fun. That's funny little tidbit there. So I would definitely be eclectic. I would probably say, let's see. Oh, if you guys know Bella Fleck and the Flecktones, probably not. But anyway, that's a unique group acoustically that has like 10 different instruments. They swap in and out, basically like an all-star cast. No one would get it. I would probably be booed off, like it was some sort of punishment on Impractical Jokers or something. But that would be my closer music, and it would probably just throw off the hitters, I guess.
So while we're talking, so that's your closer music. That's the music you're coming out to. What's your go-to karaoke tune?
Oh God, I've only done karaoke once or twice, and when forced, absolutely forced by someone in my party or relationship status or something like that. So I know lots of words to lots of songs, but definitely not a karaoke guy. Can I tell? Oh, you know what? One embarrassing song was when I was like 13, 14. And this was back, MTV, had their, like at 4:00, they had their top 10 or something like that for music videos back when MTV played videos. And it was for like, I think it was 2 months in a row, hustle home from school because 4:00 and they lead up to number one, which was Mariah Carey Dream Lover. So that is damning. That's a damning omission. But you know what? You got to open up on the vibes here.
I was not expecting that one.
You go a few shows back and you'll learn that Matt's is "Party in the USA" by Miley Cyrus, but you'll have to go back a few shows to hear him.
I think that's
talk
worse.
about that.
As I say, Mariah Carey, that's worse.
So
You all know I'm coming in like wrecking ball. I'm coming in like a wrecking ball.
Can we get some of that Mariah Carey?
No one can do Mariah Carey. Mariah Carey 10 years ago couldn't do Mariah Carey. She goes into the stratosphere. Come on, that's not even fair. I said I know the words.
We don't have anybody like her and Whitney.
You guys should do
and
challenges. You guys should do
Dion.
fantasy challenges, and the loser has to do karaoke on your show.
Oh, that would be awesome.
That's a
That's
great
a good
idea.
idea.
Everybody
That
that
would
comes
probably
on
be-
between January and April, they do a dynasty. They do like an NFL draft, bet. You get them, you goad them into doing some bet, and then guess what? You have them on the following year, and then they got to do it. They got to do it to come back on. That's sort of like an entry. They
Great
do
idea.
30 seconds of the main strain or whatever.
I've been trying
I'm
to
still-
get people after every when Kyle asks his question. I always try to get someone to someone put Spice Girls. I always try to get someone to sing, and I haven't been successful yet. So I'm going to get one of you guys to sing your theme song.
Okay.
Sadly, that wouldn't be the worst thing I've done in the last 6 months as far as TV goes. Calvin still owes me a hot chip, though, and I haven't forgotten about the hot chip challenge that he lost. So there's still a hot chip challenge coming from Calvin.
I don't even know what you're talking about. Anyway, back to the interview with Chad here.
Noted. I'm writing it down. Show sheet.
Yeah. No, so getting back, music obviously plays a big part in our lives, and then we could talk about music. It sounds like for a little while too. But growing up, for those of us who end up liking to talk about this kind of stuff, and we would talk about it, no matter what. For someone like you, who has made in a lot of ways a career out of this, like sports are probably really important to you growing up. So, what was that go-to sport for you? Like, did you have like a particular sport that you were better at than others, or maybe favorite teams? Like, what was sports mean to you as a kid?
Yeah, I was one of those kids that, they had those little books in the 80s and 90s where it was like every year you put the picture of the kid, I'm in second grade, here it is. What do they want to be when they're, when they grow up? What's their favorite, what do they do at recess? What's their favorite class, all that kind of stuff. And I would always put a football player. And I would always put like whatever team, talk about a homer, whatever team won the Super Bowl or whatever the year before, I would put that team. Boy, I didn't know about regression when I was 9, but yeah. And so, but I kind of learned that football wasn't going to be my thing. I think my parents would have let me play it. But I definitely didn't do Pee Wee and stuff like that. So I was little league and I was horrible. I think my batting average was like 150, which is really hard to do when you're getting one at bat minimum per game. 23 at bats for the whole year type of environment. But hell, I was on a good team. So that transitioned to basketball. And then I ended up in high school. I was like on like rec teams in middle school. Transitioned to not making it high school wise, even though I was tall enough. And then moving over to tennis, just kind of picked it up. And now, I've been playing good chunks of my life, and that's definitely like I'm in the when you look at like rankings, what that means worldwide. I mean, I'm probably in the top 10 to 15%, which it sounds really impressive, but it's not that. I'm not going to say not that hard, but tennis has definitely been the thing I've gravitated towards in my 30s and now 40s. And pick up basketball. I've learned you can get hurt. you can be out with an ankle, and you get pushed around a little bit, and all of a sudden it's not quite as fun. And one of the things I want to pick up. I want to pick up disc golf. Ultimate Frisbee. Ultimate Frisbee is what. I played a few times, and I know people get crazy into it, and I don't even know if it's a real sport, but haven't found the right group, I guess, or club or league.
Hey, if people can consider pickleball a sport, I'm sure we can let you get away with your ultimate.
That is absolute ping pong.
basically. So I got to ask you here I know you're a big tennis junkie. I did my little research there. Have you ever found yourself in a Medvedev type situation? We just saw him the other day on the TV. I know you guys probably weren't paying much attention on the other side. Medvedev, the Russian there, cramping up. I don't know if you've seen the highlights of that, but he was like walking like I do the next day. You know what I mean? He was kind of
The Frankenstein walk.
he was cramping. Have you ever had
I
that?
usually get cramps after. And it's kind of crazy when you do, because you think you're fine and you're like, okay, I got, especially here in Florida in the summer. I mean, you have got to really up, if you don't have a high salt diet, and even if you do, a lot of potassium. I eat like 12 bananas a day, but that's a sidebar discussion for maybe in 6 minutes when you ask me about it. But yeah, I've had cramping that night or the day after, and it can be pretty severe. And I actually had one a few years ago when I first got to Florida that was like, you're walking around and you feel dizzy with heat issues. And so that's really a big one if you play quasi competitively and you're in a hot environment, especially.
Well, we don't quite get that nasty humidity that you guys get down there. But I remember the one time I was playing in a semi-pro, kind of like the tropics for basketball, one of those type of leagues for football. And I had a drive up all to all our games, and the game was about 4 hours away. And to get there, it was like one of those roads that got to go like this and twist and turn. I'm coming back home. It's about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm driving. I got my foot on the gas pedal, and then also my hammy just cramps right up, and I'm full back like this, trying to pull everything back. Worst ever. Like, you couldn't put the brake on because you're fully extended. And
If you don't catch it in the first 2 seconds when it starts to go, if you can grab your toe or foot or whatever it is and stretch it out, you're going to be okay. But man, if you don't get it early, it just locks on you.
Yeah.
So speaking of cramping here, I did some more research. We could go into details with the football guys, because I know you're kind of with them too. You do some work, because that's a great family of people that they got over there. But I wanted to kind of go more to the under the helmet crew and the co-hosts that you've had in the past and currently and stuff like that. If you guys it's draft season right now. If we were at the combine, we've got yourself out there. We've got Veach, we've got Flowers, we've got McNamara, we've got Torch. Who's going to wow the scouts with their skills?
I'm going to be not even so humble in this. I know I would crush all of them, because I've actually done 40 stuff when they were doing the run rich run, and everyone post your 40s and stuff. I actually sent one in when I was in DC. It was at the EUGM monument there in Arlington, Virginia. And I thought it'd be a really cool spot. But on that day I ran like 4.95, 4.90, something like that, which for a, mid 30s at the time white guy, I mean, that's never played a lick of anything truly competitive or amateur. Yeah, I mean, I'll take that. I'll take that. And when people are now posting like, "Oh, I ran 6.0," it's like 6.0. Are you even trying? It's like, I'm not even a runner. So it's like, anyway, you'd be sore the next day. But I know if we. And I actually wanted to when I was in the Army. I was like, man, it would be fun. Like, let's around combine time. Let's for one day at PT. Let's all get out and do these drills and stuff. And it never really took hold. I tried to do it for a few years, but yeah, I know I would do pretty well. My vertical might be like, I don't know, 20 inches, which isn't. I mean, it's not basketball like. It's certainly not. A gym roof laser or anything like that. But yeah, respectable 40 time. I'm sure I could post. And of everybody else in there, I mean, I think Jordan would. I think he'd be respectable in a couple maybe, but to be honest, that's about it. And again, I don't think anyone would fault me for saying that.
That's all right. I'm sure they're going to get back at you a little bit later with some of the stuff that we got going on.
Yeah, seem dream lover to me.
That could probably be arranged. We might be able to make that happen. So we're going to move away from the combine here into fantasy a little bit. Do you remember that first fantasy league you were in? Was it football? Was it baseball? Was it tennis? Was it a fantasy tennis league? What was that?
I was a fantasy baseball guy first. I was the reader of baseball cards, on the back end. You get me late 80s, early 90s. I was all over it. I knew everybody. But when the internet started, I was still doing baseball, like 96, 7, 8. Like I first got into baseball. I love the numbers. But if you love numbers, I mean, to be fair, fantasy baseball is way better than fantasy football in terms of predictiveness and all this stuff. But I just know it'd be a rabbit hole, and frankly, not a very productive one or, financially feasible one. I'm not sure of that industry, but I'm guessing it's not even close to as popular as fantasy football. So, but yeah, I remember in 98, I played in both, and I really got into fantasy football, and I believe that was I didn't know much. I knew NFL, but I didn't know about fantasy. And that was the year, I think I took Randy Moss in like the first or second round or something. Didn't know anything. And then I took Dante Culpepper, who's supposed to be their starting quarterback, but only threw like 2 passes before that. I took him in like round 20 or whatever, last quarterback. And I ended up winning the league. And I was like, oh, this is easy. I went undefeated, had a bunch of other players or whatever. But I was like, and then so that gets you hooked. And then the next year, I suddenly didn't play fantasy baseball. I started it, and guess what? You get to August or September, fantasy baseball is right there in the grind, finishing the year. And I had a team that was in like first or second place. I totally forgot about it because fantasy football was here. So that to me was like the positive indicator of, I guess football's for me, and baseball was a relic of the past, because I never really had interest or picked it back up. And it was straight to football from, that was 99, I guess, onward.
Well, speaking of relics of the past here, can you tell me about Eddie Lacy underwear?
That's that's a really good series of drops. One thing, I don't know if you guys do it, but man, if you keep your outtakes, you keep these little audio tidbit moments. I know Top Shots is, a big thing right now, but just these moments that you have on the show, whether it's something from 5 years ago or just your banter back and forth. I still have a bunch of stuff when Doug Veach was on the show, and we would trade things back and forth. Yeah. So I think it was, Doug, basically Eddie Lacy had to try so hard, and it came about with bacon thighs also. And Trent Richardson fell into this too, where they were, just barely athletically inclined enough for the position. And so it was about underwear sweat. It was about, the only thing that keeps them motivated was the smell of bacon, because that was really their thighs rubbing together. So yeah, we had a great time, and that was definitely something that you can't possibly, like, to be in those moments where it's like you're trying to have a show. Hey, we're trying to put a show together here, and yet you're red, you're sweating, and you're laughing. And those sorts of moments. And you guys definitely have that type of show where, keep it loose. Let's talk football, but let's find other ways and other methods, and have a great time doing it. That's really something that I thought was the sort of peak Chad and Doug period, where so many outtakes about players, and Eddie Lacy, Trent Richardson, and guys like that were the pinnacle of some of the things we poked fun at.
Nice. Let's see. Will you talk about one of your favorite leagues? We all have those leagues that are like first leagues or hometown leagues with our buddies. Can you give us one of those stories?
Yeah, sure. What was funny, so this was actually I was already at Football Guys. I was still trying to figure things out. I think it was like maybe 7, 8, 9 years ago. And it was my only opportunity to be in a quote unquote home league. And I don't even know how this happened, because it's not like I looked on Craigslist or anything like that. But in the DC area, there was a guy that I don't know if there's a classified ad on Yahoo Fantasy Football at that point in time or whatever it was. But they were putting together a DC fantasy league. Redraft, no frills, 15, 16 man rosters, whatever. It's the kind we kind of smirk at, right? It's like an office league. It doesn't really mean much. And it was going to be a 10-team league, for goodness sakes. I mean, how much can you pick apart 10-team leagues? But so this guy, and he was sort of the smart guy in the family, the guy that makes fun of his, I show up at their house. So it was a live draft. I was super pumped for it, because I was like, in person, this is what it's all about. Show up, and it's like him, his brother, his mom had a team, his dad had a team, and then 2 or 3 people like me in just the area that replied. So we were strangers, but this became like a 3 or 4 year run before I moved away, where we would go over there. They were massive, and I can say this because that's what they were, Washington Redskins fans. And the funniest part we would have the fantasy draft, but during the fantasy draft, they would put on a VCR recording of like Washington Redskins great, the Super Bowls and stuff like that. So it was great. We get to watch like 1980s, 1990s TV with the commercials and how the broadcasting was, and you never knew if it was a first down or if it was fourth down or anything like that. It was like the nostalgia of that, but also just the crazy the crazy approach to team building. And I felt like I was just, fish in a barrel, like could do whatever I want. But yet we know the advantage is minimized in 15-man rosters in a 10-team league where everyone rosters look pretty good. So you can't pick too much apart. But I eventually left that league, when I moved away, and who knows what happened. I think they maybe wanted to make it an 8-team league, but it was just a great experience because that's really what it is, like in person. And I've gotten to do those flex leagues, which are they've been in New York City, they've been in DC, but the live ones, and we've done auction before. So those with Jake Seeley, and those are through SiriusXM and things like that. But in person is really what it's all about. And I know a lot of people have never done either a draft or an auction in person, but that is worth like its weight in gold and 10 leagues of otherwise, that you totally understand how people can play for no money, or you just got to supply the draft party if you lose the next year, or whatever the low stakes are. You would rather win that league, and you kind of get it. When it's in person, you're going to go back and maybe you have a belt, that you bring and wear the next year. But that's really how this got started. Fantasy sports and fantasy football. It's about pummeling your friends or your coworkers or your family. And I know that gets lost, and I know it's way easier to be in 20 leagues online. But if you can find that one league locally, I think those are the ones you remember the most over the years.
So is it better to pummel your friends, or is it better to pummel people you've never met before that have invited you into their home off of Twitter, Craigslist? Twitter's basically Craigslist for fantasy football, let's be honest. But
yeah, I will say they all ganged up on me because I think the first year I won it, so you went like, and they had this weird payout where it would be like 10x it'd be like 8x for first place, and then the second place like gets their money back. It was literally all or none. And yeah, so I won the first one. That kind of grind their gears the wrong way. And I think I finished, second or something the next year. And then again, regression got me probably, just with how high variance that is. But yeah, like you were saying, I mean, coming in and taking one from the family is not a great feeling. You kind of wonder the second, third year, you'd be like, is this potato salad poisoned? I'm not quite sure.
This guy keeps taking our money. Gosh.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't have to bring my entry fee. Should you just comp me from last year? No.
You took like every member of their family's money that year. Yeah, that's least you could do is bring like a potato salad or something to the next one.
At least I know it wasn't poisoned.
Right. I love what you said about fantasy baseball, and we've actually had quite a few who come in and they say like, yeah, that's where I started because stats are so big in baseball. And I think Graham Barfield and some of these other guys talk about how that was kind of their first passion. And you're right. You want to do a real behind the grind, like catch me in like early August when I'm trying to manage the fantasy football drafts I'm in and the 5 fantasy baseball leagues that I'm in, because like that gets like real tough. But fantasy baseball is a lot of fun to do. So obviously the answer is probably going to be fantasy football. But if you had to choose between the two, which one would it be, and what would be the right settings maybe for football?
Okay. Yeah. I would say this though, like I actually like the grind. I like the fantasy baseball sort of daily aspect, and I never played Dynasty, but I would imagine that's awesome, with the minor league system and the fact that you can sort of look at those stats just like we can with college football and create models and all of this stuff. And I know the advanced sites they have for baseball and just fantasy baseball in general, I would be so geeky. So from a personal level, the problem is I don't really enjoy watching baseball. So the actual I would just be a box score scout and be like, I don't even know if this guy's righty or lefty, to be fair. So that would be the big divide for me. And I just know as an analyst, it would be tough to survive. It would have to be a true labor of love, I feel. I do know I'm actually one co-host for UTH, Scott Spratt, when I was over at Pro Football Focus. He ended up going over to fantasy baseball, or he was coming from fantasy baseball. So that was an interesting discussions with him, as he's actually done both. But yeah, I would say from the enjoyment factor of watching the games, scouting the players, and actually the visual part, football is easy for me. I would say if if you told me, hey, just for funsy, you can be in one fantasy baseball league, super deep, Devi, Dynasty, all this kind of stuff, I'm sure I would get totally geeky and love every single second of it, but it would be like consuming my world because you basically have to start over. Like just throw these Excel models away and start over, and it'd probably take me a year or two with the sheer volume of stuff you would want to put in there baseball wise to start getting your model and data kind of itch scratched.
Choose one of these and give us a reason why. DFS, Dynasty, or Redraft?
I actually think Redraft is an interesting middle ground that I don't understand anymore because Redraft, you lock in for 4 months. But DFS, you can choose not to play any given week or any given slate. So I always find so you play Dynasty and really the waiver wire matters. Yes, you're doing that on a weekly basis. You're setting lineups, but it really is a long game. That you're making trades beyond like this season or this month typically. But so I like the blending Dynasty and then dabbling for me DFS on whatever weeks I want, and whatever slates that I feel like there are some value and leverage points and players that I like. And so what I will say for folks that just play DFS, man, that's a wild ride. Like I know enough about gambling and I know enough about bankrolling, and I've done it again. My bankroll has been like $550. I mean, we're talking really low stakes here. But I think the cool part though is, if you're technically, using part of that bankroll and gambling. Well, I'm not supposed to say that. Sorry. It's a game of skill that you are leveraging upon yourself. Let me be PC here. But you can do that every single slate. Like you can end up rolling that money over and over again in terms of how many times it's in play. It's kind of like a casino. So I really like that aspect and the fact that you can say, hey, Thanksgiving weekend, hey, got stuff going on with the family. I'm just not going to play. Well, Dynasty, there's a little more, or in Redraft especially, there's a little more. You can't just ignore it and go off on a cruise for 7 days and be like, no internet, we're all good here. So I do like that aspect about DFS. You can kind of choose when you're in and when you're out.
We're going to kind of put you on the spot here. Bob's sending a question in here about the Red Sox. So, what pitcher has the most wins in a single season for the Red Sox?
No idea. Oil Can Boyd? No idea.
Close. Smokey Joe Wood with 34 wins.
34 wins? What is that, in the 1880s? That's right. When they actually started 60 games a year.
1918.
Which I love,
maybe.
By the way. They're like, Bob Gibson played both sides of the doubleheader. He struck out 34.
Actually, you're pretty close there, Calvin. 1912.
I was going to say, it had to be back then, yeah. Had to be. Well, that's interesting history. I didn't know anything about that. Look, you always learn something new when you come to the Dynasty Vipers. We're going to throw something out there that you didn't know about. But back to fantasy and back to you, Chad. At some point, as you're playing these fantasy leagues, and you talked about starting in '98, and I think the only thing going on right there was Bob Harris's 1-900 numbers to call in for things like that, and there was radio stations that were playing the box scores at the end of Sunday. Like that's about all that was going on in the fantasy industry. Maybe some magazines. At some point, I think it seems like you decided, hey, this is something I kind of want to jump in and be more than just a hobby for me. What was that transition like for you?
Well, it started that actually it was Dynasty shows in 2011. So I was playing a little bit. I had been in a few Dynasty leagues. I was playing Redraft before, but you start listening to shows, and back then, it was tough to get. No smartphones really, and you had to listen either on your computer. You had to download it as a file, and you can get it on these little boxes, MP3 players, and travel around with it. A portable radio station that took you, 30 minutes to put the stuff on. Not like seconds now. It's like, where is my show? It's been 4 seconds. So part of it was I was listening to a bunch of fledgling Dynasty shows that were out there at the time because that was my format. I listened to NFL stuff or fantasy stuff, but I really didn't like what was out there. I said, and it's part of I think, I'm just not happy with the content, but part of me was like, I think I can do better. And so I was like, well, you got to prove it, get out there and get yourself a cheaper free account. And back then it was Blog Talk Radio. And I just said, I'm going to start. And I don't take that lightly in terms of like, some people start and be like, we'll see if next year I want to do it, or, in 2 months, maybe it's not my thing. I was just like, at that point, you're just like, oh, well, Tuesday nights or Wednesday nights or, whatever night you pick, it's like, well, that's it. And back then it was a live show. So you actually had to show up, call in on your phone. And again, it was a hassle and a half. Far different than this, where you got live streams and video and all this kind of stuff, and people get it on their phones. But I just started it and just hit episode 500 of that weekly show. So the commitment factor of, now 10 years or so has been there. So it started with a podcast and just started talking, just started figuring it out with that medium. But I started realizing with all the tracking I was doing and started, coming up with systems to project player value, for formats and what I played. So I was already doing a lot of work for my own leagues. And so basically it just started a few years later with, well, what if I just start sharing some of the things I'm learning, beyond the podcast? And that's what started UTH Dynasty, is that, I wanted an outlet beyond football guys, which I love, and I'm still there. And it's a great place to work and thrive and just be in the presence of so many great talents. That I wanted the opportunity, though, to have my own thing, that I could press record. I could record whatever I wanted, whenever, record a show that's 5 minutes long, which I know is uncommon in the podcasting industry or space. But if I wanted to, I had one thing to say or a trade to talk about, I could do it. If I wanted to do an article that was 300 words, I can do it, and no one's going to furrow a brow. So all that kind of came into focus when I started doing that. And again, I was still doing a bunch of other stuff, side hustles. I was in the Army, active duty at the time, but just I had this passion that if I'm doing all of this work for my own teams, I think others can benefit from it. And I've really just taken that approach where I'm not a big, give a bunch of stuff away for free. It's highly subscription based. And, I don't have a free part of the site. Pretty much everything is behind the paywall and the premium shows as well. But part of that is, hey, if they want a refund, they want a refund, and that is fine. But take a leap of faith and try it out. But I don't want just everybody coming in from the streets that can just consume whatever they want, and hopefully they'll sign up for something else. That really hasn't been my sort of business model or approach, because part of it this whole time was I think I have something valuable to offer and to help people. And I don't want to give that away, and I want the subscribers and listeners to have an actual tactical advantage over their league mates. And the only way to do that, to be fair, you could either partition off and say, well, only 100 listeners or 100 subscribers, and when it's done, sort of like a Black Friday sale at Walmart, like that's it. We got 6 TVs. When they're gone for $20, they're gone. You can either do that, or you have to try to restrict it with price. And unfortunately, that's the only ways to do it. So I know there's a variety of approaches on that, but that's one thing I decided very early. And part of the reason I could be aggressive in doing so was because if this doesn't turn into anything, that's okay. If it never turns into a full-time job and career, which it has, but that wasn't really the expectation at the time. That's sort of, one business approach that I did make. And same thing with the UTH trade calculator, that I was using it on my own, and I was like, holy cow, this is really valuable and clarifies a lot of things, and it's winning me leagues, and it's improving my teams year over year. And I was like, I think it's valuable. I think I'd like to share it, but I really don't want to share it that much. And it was like, so you can't give it away for free. You can't make it really cheap, and it's like, well, how expensive is too expensive and extraneously expensive, so so my whole idea when I released that, and that was a few years into the site, I was like, I don't want to make it, I actually don't want people to sign up. I want very low numbers to sign up. And little did I know, more people would sign up for that than I would have ever dreamed, in the first 6 months or year. And it's been, steadily growing and sustaining from that point forward for years now. But it's interesting just to see some of those dynamics of what I always tell people, because you can have a bunch of people listen to you. You can have a bunch of people read your content or consume your rankings. But if they are free and you share them on Twitter, or you have a site that has a giant free section and you have, people trumpet your content, but it's all free. What I always say is be careful, because you never know what people truly think of your content until you charge for it. Because once someone has to enter PayPal, Venmo, credit card, whatever it is, even if it's $5, even if it's 20, whatever it is. But until they have to do that, until there's a partition, you never really know if that person that loves you, but do they love you because you're free? Because there's a lot of free stuff out there. And to be fair, again, I totally get it. If people want to only consume free content, there's tons of great free content out there, and I totally understand. However, if you think you have something valuable, or you have something that, in addition, Patreon type stuff, and it's like super fan related, and people just want more, that's awesome, and that's your super fan group. But there will always be super fans, and yet if all you have is free stuff, you're really not giving much impact or difference making potential there for your super fans that love you.
I love that. You never give the milk. What's it saying? You never give the milk away for free, or else no one's going to buy the cow, right?
Okay.
I think that's referencing something else in life, but yes.
Yeah, well, we're going to go with this on this purpose here. Let's talk about that journey. You just mentioned the blog where it kind of started. We had Go Ahead and Score comes up, UDH, PFF.
Wow, did you say go ahead score? I haven't heard that in like 10 years. I am truly impressed, Matt. I think you talked to people in my life. I need to ask Mrs. UTH if she's been in contact with you in the last week. Go Ahead Score. Can I just tell a quick story? Go Ahead Score, run by Jim Day, who years ago, he was anywhere and everywhere. He was on podcasts and running various sites. But he was the first guy, I will say. He thought I was nutty, which he was actually accurate. That I was just looking for a platform to write long ago, and he was like, yeah, man, come on, do your thing. And he gave me an open window. He said, write whatever you want, whenever you want. I was like, awesome. I can't wait. I'm not tech savvy, so like starting my own site, it's still a little beyond my pay grade. But back then he started Go Ahead Score, and I think it's long defunct. I haven't checked in the last, checked on that domain name in a while. But and so what I started doing, my passion was building dynasty teams through startup drafts. And so what I would do is I would take a draft. And look at every team. I would look at each position. So that would turn into, I would write a long form, 2,000 plus words on one team. Like, how did they draft? What did they do? What would they go? What's their time frame for contending? Best picks, worst picks. I would do that for every single team. So like every day of the week, I would submit another article for Jim to, okay and click publish. But he used to be like, almost like, what's your problem? Like, this is one draft. He was like, for 2 weeks straight, you've been submitting 2,000 word articles every day about each team, each position. Like, what are you doing? He was like, no, I love it, man. But you're a little out there in terms of your commitment factor to this. And I was just like, I don't know, man. I love it. It's an interest to me, really getting in deep with this. But really, Jim Day was the guy that the absolute first vehicle there for me to get my start and have a platform online in some capacity was Jim Day. And he's someone that I got to meet after that, at some of those expert drafts and things like that. But a real beacon in terms of my progression, at least early on, that was able to get me out there.
I believe, and maybe I'm wrong here, Jim Day, he kind of went by the moniker there, Fantasy Taz, I believe is what it was, correct? Mm-hmm.
Yep, Fantasy Taz. Why? Because even before, now we have guys that, play 500 best ball leagues and MFL 10s and, all these other platforms that offer, and people draft for 6 months straight, hundreds and hundreds of teams. But yeah, Jim Day was one of the guys doing that long ago when there wasn't as many platforms and definitely wasn't a number of people, that had dozens or hundreds of teams. And that's how he got Fantasy Taz, I'm sure.
Were you ever on his show where he would have those roundtables, like the podcast? I'm talking like 10 years ago. Were you ever a part of that?
Maybe one of them. Yeah. But yeah, those are some of the best broadcasts. He would be on there talking drafting and strategy. And I know July, August, he was absolutely one of the shows that you needed to listen to for redraft going July, August like that.
Yeah. What are some of your more memorable podcasts or interviews
that I've done or that I've had people on? I would say the interesting one was just the other week. We went on, and one of my jokes was it was so not about football that they pressed record, and yet I didn't know it. I kept asking throughout the show, so is this your show? So this is the show. And then when we finished, it was one of those things like, so was that a show? Did we just do it? It was like an hour and a half, hour 45. I was like, so that was it. So we had this. I think they actually had a show sheet. We didn't cover any of it, and that was sort of and that's all the idea. I'm actually thinking about using that for guests that come on my show, which I usually don't have guests, but I'm trying it out between January and April. But that whole concept of like make a really long show sheet with a bunch of stuff and literally never look at it once. Just for the people that, you mentioned before that need that control, need that feeling of safety. Like, all right, now they're going to ask me about where Saquon Barkley is going to finish this year. Boom, took notes on it, showed up to the show, and I am ready. That type of person, because half the time you're going to get people on the show that are like that. And it's like, again, you guys are like, well, two of you are like me in that capacity, where it's like you just want to show up and chat, and if it comes up, it comes up, and if not, so what? But I really embrace that, and I'm blanking. I'll have the title by the end of the show, I'm sure, or not. But it was just a really interesting concept where it's like you talked about anything and everything, and then you get done with the show, and you're like, oh, so that was it. Okay. I thought I had my tables up and graphs, and had my Holly Hobby notebook, but it didn't need any of it.
I feel seen with that. That's definitely love that, and I love to be able to go off the rails too. We certainly like to have a lot of fun here. But
sure, okay.
Yes. Speaking of,
I'm not sensing that, but okay. Every time you're like, all right, back on schedule, inside the guardrails, driver assistance. I'm sensing that. Like, I'm sensing we're 2/3 of the way there. Hopefully, there's a majority vote.
Oh, you're pretty good. You're pretty good.
Pretty good.
So back to the show sheet. My show, it says
we gone.
4A says
line 36. It says, if you weren't into fantasy, what would you be doing?
Well, I would say that one of the reasons, there was a couple of reasons, but I actually have a date that I would have been retiring from the Army in 2023. So I would still have a couple of years left. I got out after 12 years, and a big reason, well, part of the reason was that I wanted to take a shot at this. I was mid 30s, and I said, I don't want to be completely broken. I want to be a little broken, that I gave something for the country for sure. A little broken is okay. Manageable broken is okay. But I didn't want to be completely broken. But also, I was like, this is expanding. I think I had done the website for a couple of years at that point, still doing football guys. And I was like, I want to take a shot. Like, what does that feel like to do it, quote unquote, full time? So that was part of it. I would say if I wasn't in the Army, or actually if I was still in the Army, not doing fantasy stuff, one thing that I really love is taking care of dogs. And I was actually a dog walker for like 5 years. And I know that always has like a negative moniker. Walking dogs, that's sort of like delivering Uber Eats. Like anyone can do that. But I would say not everyone can walk dogs and dog sit and do all that kind of stuff, because some people don't like dogs and some dogs don't like you. So really, and it's always that they can tell right away, right? I mean, some people are dog people and the dogs come right up to you. Others, not so much. But I really enjoyed it. I walked, some weeks I would have 3, 4, 5 walks every day. Sometimes, have a dog stay over at my place for a week, watching them, or go over to their house. So I know it wasn't big money, but it was nice side hustle money at the time. Definitely helped us out, financially and saving and all that stuff. But it was something I really enjoyed. And I think if you can do in life, even if it's 2 or 3 different things, and I'm definitely an example of that with fantasy and with dogs and a few other things, that if you can do something you really love, then it's really not work. Like, I think it's hard for people, and maybe, if you're on Wall Street and you just love the grind, and it's like you work 70, 80 hours a week or whatever, but if you love it and you live at the office, it's really not a big deal. So for some people, a 40-hour a week, 30-hour a week, 20-hour a week job, if you hate it, man, that sucks. And I can only imagine. I never really had a real job. That's another admission I put on this show. One summer I worked at like a pizza parlor, a take and bake pizza place. So that was like a real job. And frankly, it was like 10 hours a week, 12 hours a week. It really wasn't high stakes or a big deal, but I was like, I don't know how people kind of do this. I guess if you love pizza, and take and bake cookie dough, if you love it, I'm sure it'll be great. But the whole, at my peak, in season, I might be, between watching games and doing everything I need to do fantasy wise. I don't know. There's a blended line, you work at home, you're doing all this stuff, but it doesn't feel like work very much. there's things that you probably would rather do, at various times. But if you're sitting there 50, 60, 70 hours a week, it's okay. You kind of like it all, So, so if you can find that, or even if it's a couple part-time things or your own boss and you're figuring things out, I say that is really, to me, living. And that's why this blurry line of like, so am I retired? I would say kind of. I'm working more than when I was in the Army, but yet quality of life is better. So it's a very interesting dynamic. And what terms do you put on things? Because again, if you love what you do, what they always say is you'll never work a day in your life. And I really think, I've experienced a lot of that where it is true. And you'll do anything you can hustle wise to not give that up once you have it.
Absolutely.
So,
how many dogs did you have at once? How many dogs did you
Oh God. Okay. And this is not like the city ordinance, you're not asking from that vein, right? Because there was one time we had, I swear we were dog sitting like 10 dogs, and that still the two of us went out at various times to walk other dogs, and the other person was kind of in charge. So yeah, that was, I still remember like peak week or whatever. I mean, it was substantial again, and that peak doesn't last very long, but yeah, I mean, you gotta love dogs. And I will say there's been one dog of all the years, all the walks, all the pet sitting, all the dog parks in this crazy world, that one dog that I got scared off of. And I don't mean for this to be stereotypical, because I've had plenty of canine best friends that have been pit bulls, but there was one pit bull, and the owner specifically said, that she's a little territorial. When they start using phrases,
Right.
a little territorial, and they had just moved in. So basically, and how it generally works is you do a meet and greet like the day before. Ideally, it's the day before. Because if it's like, 5 days, you're going to start on Wednesday and you saw him on Saturday. Yes, the dog will likely remember you, but you'd like it to be the next day if you can. So we come over, I think it was on a Sunday. I was going to start on a Monday, but new apartment building. I'd never been there before. Dog just moved in, and it was like, so the dog was fine. The owner was there. Everything was good. Come back the next day, and and never before. So I have plenty of pit bulls that I've had no problems. It's been awesome. But this one, the thing too. So I had treats just in case. I've never really used them, but I crack the door, and the dog's like 5, 6, 7 feet away, and they do the low head. And they just, and they do the, like a little growl, and you open the door a little more, and it just looks a little more questionable, is what I would say. And then, you want to give them the treat, you're talking in a high voice, you're being very friendly. This dog never got better. So I don't know if they remembered me from the day before. Maybe they did. Maybe that was part of it. They're like, I know you, and my owner's not here, and I don't trust you. So that was the one time that I didn't want to force it. Like, the dog had so many negative. So that was the one time that I would say a dog, quote unquote, beat me. That it was a game. It was a game. Normally they warm up really quickly. They're excited to see you. They want to go out. And even if they're sort of like, whatever, who cares about you? You get them out, you start walking around, and they realize that you're good people and you're having some fun together. But that was the one dog where I ended up texting the owner and just saying, I can't do it. I can't get in there. They didn't even go for the treats. I put some treats on the ground. They wouldn't come over and kind of warm up and realize food and Chad go together. Like, I couldn't get any of this stuff going. And that was the one time where I was like, I felt bad. I don't know if you want to get off work and come by here or just see him after work, but I just can't do it. I just can't do it with all my spidey senses going off.
So we've now passed the 1 hour mark. So people who are still watching, if you want to PayPal me some cash, head over
to like a Calvin comment
at
with the bookkeeping
gmail.com. Send some money. We'll take it. We'll work with it. Now, you mentioned on my show sheet, I have dogs and tennis actually written in here. So,
is it your show sheet or is it someone else's, to be fair?
It's my show sheet. I put this together. And
so we have two show sheets. Are these conflicting show sheets or are they the same show sheet? Do you share a show sheet? This is hard to say.
I share the show sheet.
Is it a Google Sheet show sheet?
Yes, it's a shared Google show sheet.
I don't know if Major knows what it is.
Yeah,
he's on here.
You got it too.
We all got it. You're the only one who doesn't have
show
it.
Sheets going on.
We got 3 show sheets. 3 shared show sheets.
Say it 3 times quick.
If you were not, we kind of talked about this, and you mentioned these other jobs, but I did some research, And I came up with a couple other possible jobs that you could be into.
Research throughout the show.
Oh yeah, I've done some research. We've hit up some people of your past here. I thought maybe one of the jobs that you could find a groove into, maybe a taste tester, perhaps raw oysters. What would you kind of go with that? Is that something that you'd be interested in?
I love raw oysters. You know, I actually almost got kicked out of a it was, I believe it was Thanksgiving or Christmas buffet. We were traveling around, and I actually researched, you know, data side of me, but researched how to get one over on buffets, and seafood is the way. Seafood is the way to take down the house, guaranteed. And we were there for like, you know, Mrs. UTH puts like a 2-hour confine. Like, it gets awkward, I guess, after that amount of time. I'll just stay all day. I will stay until they actually kick me out. But yeah, raw oysters, I mean, they run like, even at a buffet, like $1 each, you know, and that's like a good happy hour rate, you know? So, I mean, you can get up to your $30 quota. And what was funny is the first time I got raw oysters at a buffet, they were, I asked for, because I didn't want to be greedy. I'm always that type. I'd rather go back 20 times. But they're like, oh yeah, you want 6 or 12? I was like, 3. I was like, 3, just one more, please. And then I was back like 5 minutes later because I realized you get back to the table, you prep them a little bit, you have some other stuff, but you're like, 3, all right, didn't even feel that one. And then you're heading back over there. You're like, 12, I'll take 12. I know most people say 12. I'm new, sorry. But yeah, raw oysters are my jam, and maybe this is where you got it from. But I owe oysters. See, this is the thing. Jordan McNamara says I owe him oysters. I'm not really familiar with why. Something happened down in Mobile a few years ago. We got happy hour oysters. Everything was good. We shared it. You know, it was great seafood stuff down there at a couple of these restaurants. But apparently we had some bet, and I lost. So I don't believe either of those things. But again, what I said is the bet only counts in the confines of Mobile. So I'm only paying that off. Like, if we meet in Des Moines, Iowa, or New York, or whatever, no bet. No bet. It didn't exist. If you're in Mobile, it counts, and it was a bet, and that's when I pay it off.
How many times have you been sick eating the buffet oysters? Like, that buffet
Never.
is not really.
Oh, okay. No, never. I will say, like, I am like a garbage disposal stomach. Not that I treat it that way, but like, I am just capable of anything that goes through there. So yeah, I didn't know seafood would be suspect on a buffet. These were nicer places, I will say. So these were, you know, you're paying $30, $40, $50 for, you know, Thanksgiving, Christmas. It's just the two of us, you know, we don't have, you know, a bunch of kids and family and all this stuff to have a big get together. So for us, it's like so conducive. You go to just a nice restaurant that has a buffet, wipe your hands of it, no leftovers, no cleaning, no anything, let them do all the hard work. So for us, that's been our move, and it's been really fun over the last few years.
I also heard that if that doesn't work out, maybe a stand-up comedian or something around April Fool's Day or something. I heard you're big into April Fools.
I do love April Fools. It's coming up. I got to come up with something. I will say this is probably one of the worst ones. Is one of my worst April Fools, but actually one of the best was I convinced my parents when I was in the Army that I was getting deployed on April 1st, which was one of their big fears, because I was a stabilized assignment in DC, but I concocted this giant story that I was going to have to get deployed because of, you know, I don't know, current climate conditions. This was long ago. But yeah, so they believe that. I think one other year, you know, I said that I was having a baby. That was another April Fool's year. Yeah, so I usually do it up pretty nice. I used to do it with, you know, shaving cream in the shoes and stuff like that when I was a kid. But I progressed to the shock value of news. So yeah, April Fool's is probably, now that you think about it, it's probably my favorite holiday. But you know what? I don't know. Everyone's kind of up on it. You know, we always have like April Fool's Twitter, right? I'm sure that'll be a big thing again this year of just NFL news or trades or people trying to break stuff or whatever. So I don't know. I feel like in the internet era, like before, it would be like people wouldn't really know what day it is. And then by 8 a.m. on April 1st, people have already been bombarded with Facebook and Twitter and all these other things where it's just like, yeah, I've been there before. I'm stupider than ever because of my phone. But but you're not going to trick me anymore like you could when you were, you know, 1980s.
Yeah, so relationships are like super important. Can you talk about some of the guys that helped you along the way?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I would say in terms of like big names and just super nice guys, it was
small
funny.
names too.
No, I know, but I'm thinking back to the very beginning. I already mentioned Jim Day, who, again, I think a lot of people in 2021 may not even know who that is, or they're hearing the name on this show for the first time ever. So he's one that definitely helped me along the way. At Football Guys, here was one interesting thing. When I was thinking of starting a podcast, or maybe once I had just started it, I reached out to Cecil Lammey, and he is the nicest guy, and his start is very similar, that someone helped him out. He was a regular guy calling into radio shows in the Denver area. Let's fast forward ahead. He proved he was better than the guys that were on the radio. He would be one of those regular guys that calls in, and he's dropping dimes, he's dropping straight fire. And he's on ESPN radio. He's a correspondent in that area with the Broncos, and things have just shot through the roof for him. But he was at Football Guys doing the Audible. As we know, I think they just had 3,000 episodes of the Audible. They've been around, long before I was. And but I just reached out, just as a new podcaster a decade ago, and said, I'm getting started. Did you have any tips? And he thoughtfully, I think it was like a day or two later, thoughtfully sent me an email. And I still kept it, all these years in my now almost defunct Yahoo email, that he was that he was so helpful. He talked about what kind of mic he used and some of the process there. And obviously, I wasn't going to be spending $500 or whatever his upgraded what he's using at that current time. But he gave me a lot of tips on what to do. And he basically, one of the tips, and I tell others that now I'm paying it forward to others, that just press record. Your early shows are probably going to stink, do the best you can. But if you listen back to it, kind of cringe and really look and self-scout yourself, you'll get better. And it won't be in 5 shows. It won't maybe be in 10 or 20, but 50 shows, 100 shows, 200 shows. Keep improving, keep that improvement mindset, and you'll get somewhere, and keep that hustle, which he obviously had and has. So he's one. Also, as a writer, I reached out to Matt Waldman. And again, this is before I was on as a staff writer at Football Guys. Again, super helpful. You wouldn't be surprised because the RSP is 5 trillion pages, but his email was long in his response to me. It was a personalized, not copy and paste anything. Truly, I care about up and comers in the industry. And that is never lost on me. I've taken, and it's not that, I would say 99.6% of content at UTH Dynasty is mine. But I've had contributors over the course of time, and I always embrace that. I'm never doing a call out, like I'm looking for writers or anything like that. But I've had people, subscribers, listeners that wanted to get into it. Where do you think Katie, Tim, and Jordan came from? They were all subscribers/listeners for moments in time that wanted the opportunity to record shows or write something, or start getting into more of the analytical side of fantasy football. And just embrace that, because you never know where it goes. I've had others that have gone on to other sites and bigger things, bigger opportunities, that I think that pay it forward aspect, when you've had somebody help you, it's really easy to look and say, that was me. And yes, it's a little easier now than it was a decade ago to sort of network and have opportunities and platforms. But to always embrace that, of when someone sends you an email or a DM or reaches out with a question on Twitter, what I always say is, you never know where that leads, either from asking it and answering it. That could be someone, and I always treat my subscribers, and I don't want them to be a number. I don't want it to get lost. No, that's Mike. That's not customer 46782. That's Mike. He's emailed me a few times, over the years about his teams. Give a care. Give a care, because that's how, in my opinion, that's how you make it, and that's how you sustain in this business. Is, I always say, treating it like a 1980s hardware store. Know the guy that rings the bell, that comes in the door asking about nails. It's $1 purchase, but you know what? You help him out with that, he might be buying a bulldozer from you in 6 years. You never know, because you were nice to him. You actually cared. You connected that day. And so I know there's people that reach out on Twitter or have my email address from the website or something like that, that they email me, and every 6 months or every August, I actually have a friend of my parents who's like 80 years old, and he doesn't play Dynasty. He has his redraft league, but he subscribes to my site, and it's kind of quizzical why. And I think he does it just as he does it just as sort of a payback, like instead of slipping me $20, hey kid, thanks for the help. Like he subscribes to the site, but he reaches out every August about his draft and I help him. Why? I don't know. It's since good juju out there in the world. And I know if I was 80 and all senile and thinking I could maybe do something on my own, but I can't, I'd reach out to somebody too. And I wish one of my kids, my kid had a site, of one of my friends. So all those little good actions and again, positive karma you're putting out there, it all collects, I feel. And that's why, and I always tell people that run their own site or, if you get obsessed with what's my listener count, or like, oh, I'd love to be able to charge more for advertising, or man, once we get 1,000 subscribers or 1 million or whatever you have in your head that will once be successful, then if you get away from that and start valuing who you have. I had like 20 people listen to my first podcast episode. One of them was my dad. And I had my dad call in and ask a question because I thought that's what you did is you had people call in. And I wanted to make sure I had one call. And you know what? I listened back and it's awkward and whatever. But those 20 people, I still get people that email me saying I was one of your first listeners. They were one of the first 20. One of the first 20 out there in the whole world. You probably have 20 people that look exactly like you in the world. So it really is like a needle in a haystack, but start there. Like, so people that get obsessed, I want to get, 20,000 listeners to every podcast, or I want to make $300,000 a year, or I'm not going to be satisfied until I work at ESPN. You know what? You might not be happy if you get to ESPN. So just be careful. Or you know what? You're still probably going to have those days where you're like, I got a bunch of subscribers, but no one signed up today. And all of a sudden you're freaking out like you're worthless. Trust me, I still have those days, and I am so even keel about this, and I know the ups and downs, and yet it's funny that it still gets you. You're like, I worked hard today, and I had one person signed up, and I made $26, and so you start thinking like that, and you're like, no, it's an aggregate game. You have a very up and down in terms of monetary factor. It's very seasonal. So you just have to know that the good days you're gonna be like, I barely worked for that. And then the other, so it's all about continuing to strive and grind and really value Mike and Bob and Susan and all those subscribers that sign up and that positive impact when you look at someone's account, you're like, man, they've been subscribing for 5-6 straight years. And it's like, they are a super fan and you value that. And they value you. And it's so funny. Some of those people, you haven't heard from them once. Not one question. Not one time reaching out with a question about their team. Or I need help with my draft. Not one thing. And yet they don't even question signing up the next year. To me, that's being successful. And that's going beyond, so hopefully for your, lifestyle or whatever, that the numbers work. But if they don't, you're still making a positive influence. And to me, that's being successful.
All I could think of when you're talking there is that Napoleon Dynamite lucky, because the only way I can't get my dad to listen to my show. And the only way we can get Kelvin's dad to listen to our show is if we bring John Hansen on. So we're pretty limited on getting our parents to listen to us. So you're one step ahead of us.
Did he reach out and say, what's the link for the show, Calvin? Because he found out John Hansen was going to be on, or did you have to reach out and be like, can you finally listen to me, Dad?
He was like, I was telling him all these people we were going to have on the show, and he was like, what about that guy, John Hansen? I really like the fantasy guru. And I was like, yeah, we could probably reach out to him. He's like, if you get him on the show, I'd probably listen to that one.
Yeah, I'll find time over the course of a couple of weeks to listen to the whole episode, maybe, if you get John on.
Right.
So that's one of the things we are hoping to have in store for the off season. But Calvin,
well, I kind of wanted to follow up on what you were saying there, and this will be my my question that we have here on the show sheet here. But I'll go off of it. See, I can be funny, I can be cool.
Say it in Spanish or something.
I can get off.
Crazy. He's
crazy.
Let's see how this goes. Let's see if he falls all over this speed bump.
I love what you're saying, because like the connection with the people who are who are consuming your content and who are your, I guess, quote unquote customers. But I mean, the people who just enjoy your work and want to connect with you and benefit from, what you provide. There's so many ways to communicate now. I mean, there's Twitter DMs, there's emails, like, you go all the way back to 98 when there wasn't even like half of that stuff going on. But like right now there's there's TikTok, and there's like all these like new forms like Reddit. Like I forget who we were talking to, and they were talking about how there's all these people on Reddit, and it was a big account on Twitter, but they didn't even know who he was. And it's just all these different places, Instagram and Facebook and
Discord. I still don't really understand Discord. Apparently it moves so fast it'll hurt your eyes.
Yeah. So like, what are you doing, I guess, to like, are you looking to get into any of those different mediums for that kind of communication?
That's a great question. And again, like a 1980s hardware store, I am constantly saying, what can I do within the scope of what I'm already doing? So I still feel like I have a lot to work to do in terms of premium shows and what I'm producing. I'm obviously, stuck in my Excel bubble, and doing all this. I consider that maintenance. And yet I feel like a lot of people are always trying to expand. I want more writers on the team, and I want, again, all these, let's have five guests, in this one show, and it'll just be a massive all-star cast. And so they're always trying to expand. I've slowly expanded when I've been comfortable. I added a Patreon channel. I want to say maybe 3-4 years ago. And the funniest thing was they were offering strategy sessions, and the upsell part with Patreon, like you actually get on with a representative for your account, so to speak. But the real, I'm always looking at it from their perspective, like, so why are you doing this? Why are you being nice to me? You're always kind of skeptical. If you're that guy and you're like, why is this pretty girl talking to me? Like, what's her end game here? So she was talking to me, and of course it's about, hey, we think you should sell mugs, and why aren't you doing t-shirts? And we can supply all those things and take a big massive cut. So you see their angle. But when she was analyzing my account, the interesting thing she said, she was like, oh, this is interesting. Like about 5 minutes into the call, she was like, yeah, so it looks like your patrons, they stick around a long time. Like for having a monthly setup, you really don't have a lot of churn, is kind of the industry term for that. When people drop off, you get new people. I don't get new patrons all the time, but I don't lose hardly any either. So it's a real sustaining. And what does that mean? Again, servicing and providing value to your super fans. So the Patreon turned into, so I added that. Now I'm not gonna say I was reluctant to do so, but I was like, another vehicle, right? So if you have different membership levels, or the trade calculator, as I mentioned, or things like that all of a sudden now I was adding Patreon as just an additional way, bonus content, sort of get into my head of a workshop of, you hear about stuff before it's an article or before it's a full formed podcast with Jordan or Tim or Katie or something like that, where I just kind of talk about it and I'm sort of prepping for it. So you get it early, or you get a VIP chat on GroupMe, things like that. So that was really I need to do more to supply my super fans, create an even tighter group, like move from 100 who love me, or whatever, to, well, what 40 like love me enough to like marry me, like sort of thinking relationship status wise. So like keep working your way down of, keep supplying. You never want to max out as like someone that'll like, whatever you do, I'll listen. Whatever you say that is a membership, I'll sign up. You have people like that. Even if you only have 100 listeners on a podcast, there's 1 or 2 of them that probably feel that way. And so I've started doing that. I will say, I haven't said this yet, but I don't have like a staff. So everything that is done, I've learned enough to do it on my own in terms of managing the website, doing Patreon stuff, or again, all my customer support emails that come to me only and not somebody, it's been outsourced in another country. First of all, how the heck would they answer my emails? That's perplexing how anyone would think that that's an idea in fantasy football. But so I do all of that. And so it is a full-time commitment in terms of the time, but it's also interesting. So if I were to expand at some point, I think it gets eroded and it gets watered down. So your bandwidth is going too many places. And then you start to say, well, my name is on something, or the brand is on something, and then someone may be running it, or you may not. Like, why would I have a VIP chat if I'm not there? If I'm not there and I'm not discussing it with the VIPs, with the superstars that are the most valuable of all the great support that is out there for whatever your platform, if you're not going to be there and all of a sudden you start checking out and it's like, oh yeah, I'll just tell, you guys just talk amongst yourself. Like, that's not the point. The point is that I'm going to be there for you, and beyond, you take priority over an email, and then email over priority of a DM, and all these things. So I just thinking about going on to Discord or TikTok or, all these other platforms that are available. I really think, again, the expansion, like some people expand really fast, but I also think, you can get a giant support staff and things get complicated, right? And maybe the quality goes down, or the message or the branding or your intent when it's 2, 3, 4 people, all of a sudden it gets to 20 and you're like, oh, a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Whoa, this is getting interesting, where it was a lot less complicated. Even though you're expanding, your message might get lost and there might be a lot more confusion, or now I'm sort of the boss and I'm delegating, but yet I'm still doing a lot of work, and yet I'm not really doing what I love, which is writing, communicating, and podcasting like I was.
You mentioned that commitment to your super fans, and in the scouting world, sometimes we use the term your best ability is your availability. Yeah. And Under the Helmet has a pretty good track record of you guys record every week, or you record every week. When was the last time you missed a show?
Never. So yeah, and the batching thing, I'm not a fan. I know some people, especially if you're not in something that's, fantasy football, sports, it's kind of timely, right? I mean, recording something now and saying I'm going to release it in 3 weeks, there's going to be some things you say that are just like, oh, I'll take that back. So I understand, if you're in a finance show or, like a travel show, yeah, you can record 5, 6 things, then you take a month off. Sure. But yeah, I've never missed a show. There's been times, I mean, you actually saw it an hour ago where my voice was going in and out, that I've been sick. There was one time I was on Oxy or something, post-surgery, didn't miss that week. I've been traveling around a lot. We moved from Florida to San Diego and back again, and we traveled around for 6 months on one of those ventures that we called it the UTH tour. We met a lot of subscribers, but a lot of interesting situations, me recording in a bathroom, me recording in the business, watching NFL shows all night on Game Pass, till 4 or 5 in the morning at a business center in a hotel, and they thought I was nuts. They thought I was probably an insomniac or something. And that was on a day where we had a really busy morning. I got about a half-hour nap, and that was just a tough scheduling situation. But you got to show up. You got to show up when you're sick. You got to show, and like you said, your best ability is your availability. And frankly, you need the reps. And I think if you're still doing hundreds of shows and you feel like you need reps, you want reps, and 500 weekly shows, but I did the math. I've recorded probably about 2,000 shows, just me, of premium shows. That's 250 plus a year, and some years it's even more on the premium side for UTA subscribers. And again, so supplying more to the folks that are going into higher circles of support for you, you got to deliver even more to them. Is sort of my mantra, but you want to get those reps. And I always say for podcasters, start doing some solo shows, even if they're 5 minutes, 10 minutes, get comfortable having a message, having an argument, having a point of view on something, even if it's small, and delivering it without, I'm not going to call it a crutch. I love co-hosts and I love having the back and forth of 2 or 3 people. But you sometimes can get bailed out, right? With the conversational aspect. And when it's all you're going to learn some of your flaws and some of your strengths real quick.
Wow, that's some great advice. I think you kind of answered my question, but what is some good advice for people trying to get into the industry? Like, what would you tell yourself when you were transitioning from the Army to this fantasy world?
I would actually say something that Mrs. UTH said to me a couple different times, because she always takes credit, I said long ago that you should be starting your own website. You should be doing your own thing. And we started at UTH Dynasty when we started the site. Like, I think it was 2 weeks in, it was all free. And then 2 weeks in, we actually kind of thought, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, and then we'll start having a membership option. But no, it was 2 weeks in. We were like, let's just start charging now and see what happens. So the thing I would say is let's see. So just recording the podcast, I would say one of my biggest tips would be get away from the show sheet faster. Like Calvin, I would have these page and a half of Excel of Word with, again, it wasn't verbatim. I wasn't reading complete sentences, but a lot of things to reference, specific players. And I viewed it as almost a teleprompter type delivery. I would say I did that for far too long, would be number one. Number 2 would be, this is actually the first off season ever that I said, you know what, I got a little bit of extra time and I want to test my mettle, meet some new people that I want to reach out and try to be guests on more shows. I've really never done that. Get myself in new environments and stress myself, especially like, this where you just walk in and you say, who knows what's going to happen? Don't really know. It's not like for 12 minutes we're going to talk about Calvin Ridley and then we're going to switch off and then talk about the draft or whatever. Nothing. No idea what's going to happen. And that's been the key. Some of them have sent show sheets to me. I really don't look at them just because I want to be tested in the moment. But that would be the thing. It would be earlier, be guests on more shows. I would say I'm still pretty selective with bringing people on to UTH, but that's only because I find having, and maybe you guys can speak to this, but if you have 3 or 4 people, it gets tough. I mean, you guys are rotating with asking questions, and it's I do more conversational type stuff, and it's a lot of talking over. So when you get more than 2 people and really 3 people, that's when it gets crazy. So that's just one thing that I know about myself, but certainly going on other shows, that would be something that I would have done earlier and more often than just this off season pretty much. So I would tell myself that. And then as a writer, I would say, go with your instincts, which is people don't have time. To be fair, people don't have time for 2,000, 3,000 word articles. And I know sites that have quotas on you can't submit an article unless it's X long. And I think that's wrong. I think to the era of TikTok and the era of people having a hummingbird-like attention span, that get in, get out, and tell them what you want to tell them. And if it takes them 30 seconds to read your article, that's great. And you know what? If there's a way for you to pare it down and they can read in 27 seconds, you should do that. Brevity, brevity, brevity. So unless it's really mandatory, I would say try to make things shorter. There's a good quote from some writer where they said, I wrote a long article because I didn't have time to write a shorter one. And the mentality of that is that it actually takes more chops to eliminate words and be very concise with what you're saying with your words. And so that's one thing. I am a little verbose when I record shows, where I always look at the timer. It's like, meant for this to be an 8-minute show and it's 20 minutes because I talked about 3 things I wasn't planning on. But that I think is a different medium. People, and that's what the other thing I would say, tell myself, is the power of, learning that podcasting was my medium. I love writing, I love data, but communicating that through the audio medium is really where I found my voice. And so I would have done that earlier. I would have been doing bonus shows when I was doing the weekly show and pretty much nothing else. I would have started doing something. I think they had a subscription option back then, maybe, on Podbean, which was my host for a long, long time. So trying to explore ways of, again, allowing superfans to be superfans. I definitely would have told myself to do it earlier, starting a website earlier. Listening to my significant other would have been a good piece of advice, but that's always a good piece of advice generally for right. People. So all those things of just being earlier, going out on a limb, being more aggressive, taking a shot. And again, I think we're so, one thing I heard from somebody was, we get locked up, and this is a sports analogy too. I mean, if you've ever been in something that's a quasi meaningful moment, even if it's like a pickup game or whatever, where it's like, this is it, winner take all or whatever. What's interesting is I find is that sometimes you feel stress and anxiety. And I always question, are you afraid of failure? Are you nervous that you'll fail? Or the tricky part, and this will twist your brain around like the Matrix a little bit, or are you afraid of succeeding? Are you afraid of what expectations might be put upon you? Even if it's just your friends in the park, all of a sudden, Major, Calvin, and Matt, they're clutch guys, right? They're going to make the big shot because they made the big shot last Saturday. All of a sudden now you might be that guy. Expectations. So that's the one thing that I would say is, you get nervous about maybe putting yourself out there. Like I said about the trade calculator and other things where it's like, I really hold off for a long time to do something, but yet, are you afraid if it does well, or are you afraid that no one cares and it's like a fart in the wind and it just leaves your body, emanates, stinks up the room, and then it's gone? But no one cares. No one's going to care, but at least you tried. And that's one thing that I think we would all go back, whether you're 10 years old, 14 years old, and you want to ask the girl to the dance and you never do. You got a crush on someone and you never said it. You didn't go to college for the degree you actually wanted because you thought it was nuts, or you didn't want to go on that, European trip to find yourself for 6 months when now you're 35 and you're like, that would have been a nice memory to be able to go do that. Now I can't do it. So all these things that you woulda, coulda, shoulda. And I think you get to certain points and you're like, what if you tried all that? I mean, you might be in a completely different place. So I would just say all those settings that I just outlined, it would be really nice to go back in time and say, there's really no penalties if you do this and fail. No one's going to remember and no one's going to care. But one of these things may turn out to be a massive hit in ways that you have no idea how to expect.
Man, spitting fire.
I'm fired up right now. You really are. This has really been amazing. Yeah, there you go. The water bottle's gone.
That's a 48 ouncer, my friends. I'm gonna
so that's basically the cue to kind of start wrapping this up here by once the water bottle gets down, it's time to start wrapping it up. But like you said, I love my 140 character articles that I put out almost daily. So we got that going for me.
Brevity.
Chad, just kind of let everyone know where they can find you right now, where to find your work and all that other fun stuff.
Sure thing. So UTHDynasty.com, as I mentioned, and again, you're basically signing up for me. Yes, there's premium shows with Tim, Jordan, and Katie on there, and those are great. But honestly, everything else, the rankings, the metrics, the articles, most of the podcasts, all of it is me. If you have a problem with your account, if you have questions, it comes to me. So like I mentioned, I'm the guy at the door. You ring the bell of the hardware store. It's Chad behind the register, and no plans to ever not be Chad behind the register. So that's one place. Patreon.com/UTH. If you, again, some people just start there. There's some people that are just patrons. And again, they end up signing up for the site after the fact. So plenty of good content there as well. And one thing I'll mention that's a month from now is we do a live show Thursday night, Friday night. So Tim, Katie, Jordan, and myself, just for subscribers, you're going to get, as long as it goes, which is usually 4.5 hours each night, you're going to get our instant reactions there and a lot of good information. And that's just, again, one of the perks you get there. You mentioned, Football Guys staff writer for a long time now. And we got the green light last year. We're at about 50 episodes now, Jordan McNamara and myself recording a Dynasty show. And it is not lost on me. I sort of made my pitch a few times in the off season, various off seasons that, I can do this. I've been doing a Dynasty show, would love to share my talents, at Football Guys, where it's really been a bit of a closed circuit. And Football Guys is expanding heavily in the audio medium with podcasts. They've been doing it with YouTube, DFS content over the last couple of years. But the fact that we kind of opened the floodgates and that we were trusted to start, where we have a chemistry built in already. We've been doing this for a while. They didn't have a Dynasty show, which I'm not going to say it's mandatory. I'm a little biased there, but they had the Audible, awesome show. But there's just such an opportunity to expand that to other mediums. And they're doing that this off season. And we were sort of the pilot program, and the fact that it went well in 2020, we kind of feel like we were a part of that expansion and kind of earning that trust for others to come upon us. So again, I can't speak highly enough. One thing I haven't mentioned in the show that it applies right here is that being able to be my own boss and be my own sort of founder, CEO of a site, but also be the small fish in a big pond of Football Guys where they're all stars. And, coming in and basically being a sixth man or a bench player, a role player, as part of an all-star, dream team, that there's a lot of people that do a lot of heavy lifting. And the fact that I got to see Joe Bryant, David Dodds, and sort of the hierarchy of command there and how they run things for years, as I was doing that on my own small little tiny level over at UTH, but getting to see good leadership, getting to see supportive, positive messaging and support for everybody that does everything, in any regard for your site, for your business model, has just been such a teaching and invaluable bonus, not monetary, not like, Chad, great job, here's $100. No, you actually get to see on a daily basis the communication and the support and the leadership in a bigger company like that has really been a positive influence. And I actually had a chance a number of years ago, a chance to go to a different site which again I was interested in, but I got an offer that same off season to start at Football Guys, and I told myself, I was like, I don't know where this other one leads, and it may be to great places, but I always told myself from consuming their content and being just a fan that Football Guys was sort of that pie in the sky if I ever have a chance. And it really isn't about money. Like if I make more somewhere else, I was like, I think this is a good decision. And I really almost had to tell myself that for a few days when I was kind of making this decision. But it really turned out to be, number one, an obvious one, and number two, an easy one. So again, I just can't speak highly enough of Football Guys, that what I've learned being a cog in their bigger machinery, but also learning about leadership, support, and everything they do from the top down that creates it such a great place to work and not work, but basically play in the sandbox, that we all love to do. But again, you can find Jordan and I over there. It's still the Audible. We're going to be going into different channels there on all your podcasting platforms, but under the Audible, you can still find the Dynasty show, and it'll eventually become its own thing over the course of time. But still, you can find me there and articles in season. I do a new reality in season 1 that's strictly Dynasty, but that's another place in addition to UTH.
And to wrap this all up in a nice, beautiful bow and tied right back to the beginning of the show, I love how you mentioned the CEO. It's important to do your own thing, have your own show, your own thing to fall back on. It's also nice to have the Football Guys and be that small fish in the big pond to see how things go. So in a roundabout sense, you're kind of getting the best of both worlds, as Miley Cyrus and Hannah Montana would reference. Yeah,
You did it, Matt. Well done.
Is that a reference from Miley Cyrus? I mean, how do you even know that? I don't.
None of us will know, but we just say
just go
good
with
job,
it.
pat him on the head, and move on.
Exactly.
Okay, I've got enough teenage girls that have grown up that I've watched enough Hannah Montana in my day, so I know exactly what I'm talking about.
You know what's
Plus,
weird,
Billy
Matt?
Ray-
I actually thought, I was like, I bet he has multiple daughters. For some reason, I just got no. I don't know how I picked up on this. Like, oh yeah, he has a German Shepherd, or just like weird things about someone. But I was like, I think Matt has multiple daughters. I had that vibe.
It's the gray. It's the gray in the beard, I think.
Is that really it? Are they teenagers now, Matt?
He's
a lot of
only,
them are, yeah.
He's only 32 years old. Look how gray he is. That's how you could tell.
We had a couple strong beard games here, I will say. And I'm 2 weeks into trying out my own for the very first time. It is awkward, Matt and Major. This is awkward stuff, and you both look like seasoned beard pros, which always makes me a little envious of how you're able to start early, and it's so thick and luxurious.
I would definitely say season's a good way.
A lot of grooming. It's a lot of work.
That's what Tim Torch says. He's my correspondent for Beard Game. Grooming. I never would have guessed. Do you use the beard balm?
Yes.
Oh my God. What about you? He's saying no.
I'm a mountain man. This is all natural.
But
I use all my natural oils.
It looks trimmed though. It still looks trimmed. You may not use anything in it like tree bark and sap or anything, but it's still. Oh my God. He said 14 kids. Wait, is that Bob or is that Matt? You have 14 kids.
Oh, wait.
Yeah. So maybe more impressive than the beard is the mustache game. If you know
there you go.
Oh my God.
Got that nice.
You look like you have a monkey collecting tips for you. So at a carnival. This thing is. Have the big top hat. My God.
See, I got to try some of that wax and just get that nice and curled.
See, you almost have two different entities going on. You have the mustache and the beard is ants. See, I didn't see it till now. I thought you had, with the gray, it looks like mutton chops, but it doesn't connect. You have handlebar. Did you wax that thing up? You give Major an afternoon, he could get you looking real nice probably with all the products. And Calvin is clean cut like he's in the military.
Yeah.
You shave every day probably.
Every day.
Every day. The last time you had 5 o'clock shadow was at 6:30 when you got stuck on a bus.
At 5 o'clock.
You shave on the way home.
And again, to bring it all back into a nice tidy bow, we won't. If you want to catch the Dynasty Vipers doing a show on the toilet, as Chad had mentioned earlier, you're gonna have to tune into the Patreon for that action. So, with that being said, this is Dynasty Vipers ViperCast. For Chad Parsons, for Major, for Calvin, I'm Matt, and we're gone. Maybe.